All right. Well, welcome to Alyssa, who's attending this training in person, and to those of you that will be attending this training in the future. This is training on how to participate with the Montana print media team, and specifically the process for submitting letters to the editor. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And it says that the screen share is loading. Okay, so now it says that I am now sharing my screen. So hopefully, Alyssa, what you are seeing is the Montana CCL Google Drive. Can you give me a thumbs up that that is what you're seeing? Yay,
Yep,
I love a happy
that's
ending.
correct. Yep.
Okay, great. So this is the place to start. So hopefully, whoever has introduced you to the print media team will give you a link to bring you to the Montana CCL Google Drive. From there, you will see a couple of folders right here at the top. The second one being the Montana Print Media Writing Statewide Group. So you will want to click on that folder. Once that folder opens, you're going to see several resources. The one that we are going to focus on today is, oh my, it looks like somebody has changed this for me. Well, I hope that number 2 is the one. Yes, it is. Okay, folks, apologize for that little diversion. So you're going to want to click on number 2, training and print media writing. And then within that folder, we're going to number 4, print media writer training. Okay, so I'm going to start by going through this document. And the first thing that I would like to explain is the various team roles within the print media team. The first, there are 2 co-leader positions. Currently, only one of them is occupied, and that is Robin Paoni. And she shares the responsibility of leading the overall print media team. The next role that we have is one that is called a gleaner. And we will look at a file in a few minutes that actually shows you the names of who those gleaners are. They consist of people that are actually reading papers throughout the state of Montana. When they find a relevant climate or an energy story, they forward that to the media manager with a link and a copy of the text. So who is the media manager? That's the next role. That role is currently being held by Sandy Wellgreen. So Sandy is the point of contact for receiving and distributing hooks. So those relevant climate and energy stories that I mentioned, we call those hooks. What we have found is that if we write letters to the editor that refer to an article that was already published in the newspaper, we have a much greater probability of getting our letter to the editor published. Doesn't mean that's the only time we write a letter, but we have found much greater success if we hook our letter to an article that's already been published. So gleaners will send those newspaper items to Sandy, who then forwards them to writers. And this is typically done by region. So for example, if a newspaper item is coming from the Bozeman Chronicle, then Sandy forwards it to the writers that are in Bozeman. When Sandy sends those emails out, she also includes a writing coach. In other words, if someone would like a mentor to help them with writing, or perhaps take a look at the letter before it's submitted, that coach is available to you as the writer. The local chapter leader is also included on the notification. So then we come to the role of the writer. The pool of writers, as we've already said, will be notified by Sandy if there's an LTE needed in their region. What we typically find is we try and have writers submit only once per month. if a newspaper is hearing over and over again from the same person, they're going to be unlikely to publish. So we try and limit our submissions by writer to once per month per newspaper. So it is possible that you could write something and then work with another member of the print media team to have them submit it under their name. So hopefully, if you're not too worried about pride of ownership, then you can share and we can get more letters published by having them published under other people's names. So frequently we use Google Docs and multiple writers to help with editing. And a little bit later on, we'll show you where those writer folders are so that you can draft something, notify other people it's out there, and get some help with editing or just a fresh set of eyes on the article. So I mentioned the writing coaches. We have several writers on the team that have quite a bit of experience and have been in CCL for a while. And so they're very helpful for checking out wording, language, tone, and giving some advice. And so that is really the role of the coach. And then finally, you may be wondering, well, why do we include the chapter leaders on the emails? The chapter leaders, part of the role we try and play is to be encouraging or inspiring. So sometimes if we read an article and we don't have time to write the whole LTE ourselves as chapter leaders, we might type up an outline or maybe an initial few sentences just to get the writer off and running. So our role is one of support and encouragement. Any questions so far?
Not yet.
All right.
I guess one question, that first role that you said, Robin, is I'm sorry, I forget what her role is, but there's an opening. If someone is interested in stepping into that role, what's the process for that?
That's a great question. I would encourage them to reach out to Robin Paoni directly. And I don't have her email right to hand because I email her all the time and it just pops up. So certainly, if you're interested in getting a hold of Robin, you can go into CCL community and look her up within the Flathead Valley chapter and find her email very readily. So reaching out to Robin to say, I'm willing to help, she would be ecstatic. Great question.
Okay, thanks.
So the next part of this document just has some examples of when Sandy sends out the links. This is how it would typically look. So Jordana is actually a resident of Big Fork here in the Flathead Valley. And so she's constantly perusing the Daily Interlake for articles. So she forwarded an article from the Daily Interlake, both a screenshot as well as the link to Sandy, and then Sandy in turn sent it on to the group of writers for the Flathead Valley. Sandy designated Walter Roundtree as the coach. We talked about that role. The next screenshot that we have is an example of Robin. Oh, there's Robin's email. robin.l.paoni@gmail.com. So we answered that question, yay. So here's an example of Robin as the chapter leader for Flathead Valley responding and giving an actual idea for an outline. And then the next screenshot that we have is a terrific example of, we had Robin, Laurel, Carmen Henshaw all jumped in and worked together on a letter that they titled Huckleberries that was submitted to the Daily Interlake back in September. And that is one that ended up getting published. So it was a very great example of writers collaborating together and producing a successful result. So I've touched on some of this a little bit, but now I want to actually go to some of the links that are in this document so that you can see exactly the tools that are available to you. So as I mentioned, the pool of writers are notified by Sandy if there's an LTE, if there's a hook. We mentioned that we try and limit our submissions to once per month per paper. And so if you feel inspired to write something, but you've already submitted this month, then you can always put the letter into your writers folder and then ask someone else on the team to take a look at it, edit it, consider submitting it. So you can see here within the letter to the editor Google folder, there are subfolders for every single writer that we have on the team. So for example, Alyssa is here as the third writer on the list. So if I go back to the process then. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. So once the letter is ready to submit, the writer should check the media contact sheet for the appropriate method to submit. So let's go ahead and take a look at the media contact sheet. So in the first column, column B, you have listed the name of the publication, the region that it covers. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have the role of gleaner. We also sometimes call that the subscriber, because typically, if you're trying to provide a link to the print media team, you actually need to be a subscriber. Otherwise, you run into money wall issues where you can't actually provide a link. So this is the list of gleaners in column D. And then you see the LTE or op-ed word limit. So for example, for the Billings Gazette, when you submit an LTE, they will not let you exceed 250 words. The next column, column F, is the method by which you submit the LTE. If again, we stick with the Billings Gazette, they actually have an online form that they want writers to use for their submissions. And so embedded within this spreadsheet is actually a link for that LTE form. It's a little less common, but in some cases, even for LTEs, there's an email address. And again, that would be found here if that's the case. The next column over, column G, it's much more common with opinion pieces or op-ed pieces, as they're also called, that the submission goes directly to the editor. And so in that case, you can see more often than not, it's an actual email address to which it's being submitted. So any questions on how you determine the number of words or where to submit the LTE?
No, I don't think so. I do have a question about the list of publications.
Okay.
Because I noticed the Beacon isn't on the top 10. How is that list determined and prioritized?
That's a great question. I am not sure I know the answer to that, actually. I think there may have been a meeting in the past of the print media team, and they were trying to identify one publication per key region, although I can see on here Missoula has more than one, but then Missoula is a bigger market than we have. So I think it was probably a combination of the key paper in the area, a paper that has demonstrated greater likelihood to actually publish our letters. And probably thirdly, where we have an active gleaner who's really regularly checking the paper and sending things out to Sandy. I'm guessing those were the ways they identified these top 10.
Okay.
Having said that, every publication you could possibly imagine is on this spreadsheet. So if you were inspired to submit something to the Beacon, for example, with or without a hook, there's information lower down. You could simply search the spreadsheet and you would find the Beacon, how many words, how to submit it. All that information is elsewhere in the spreadsheet.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So again, once you're ready to submit, you make sure that you're complying with the number of words, you know how to submit, and then you go ahead and you submit. The next step is step number 3. So there are 2 places where we would like it to be recorded that the letter has been submitted. So the first one is actually the action tracker on CCL Community. So let me go there. So once you come to CCL Community, the first thing you do is select what type of action you're talking about. So in this case, it's the media/publication action. So you would click on that. Very rarely do we do state or province level work. So 99.9% of the time, you're going to leave this bullet as federal and go ahead and click the next button. So then they want to know, well, what type of media or publication effort are we doing? And so most of the time it's going to be either a letter to the editor or an op-ed or guest column. In this case, we're going to click on letter to the editor. So the next thing you're going to enter is, well, what's the name of the media or the publication? And let's assume in this case that we are doing the Daily Interlake. We would enter the city of Kalispell. It's already defaulted to Montana. Quite often when you submit a letter, there's not really a place within the submission form that you are given to enter a title. So more often than not, the newspaper themselves will add a title to your letter, but you can, if you didn't submit a title, enter one now for tracking purposes. So I'm just going to make this up. Solar power is the best. And then here you would actually copy and paste the text of the letter that you just submitted. So this is another reason why the Google Doc folder is so helpful, because you've saved your work there. After you've submitted the letter, you can go back to your Google Doc, copy and paste directly into this submission form here. It doesn't like that it's not 30 words. That's okay. So then you're going to put in when was the letter submitted. And then most of the time when you submit this action the first time, you don't know if the letter has been published or not. So you would leave this box blank and just click next. Is it going to let me do it? I need a lot more words. Should have come up with something for this. Let's see. Okay, I know what I can do. Bear with me, folks. Haha. Okay, so then you would click next. It's already going to know that you're from the Flathead Valley, so that'll be defaulted. If for some reason you actually co-wrote an article with someone from another chapter, you could add another chapter here. If there are other volunteers from within the Flathead Valley, you can add the other volunteers here that helped with the writing. And then, and I'm not going to do this now because this is not a real letter, but you would click on the button submit. Any questions so far or new questions?
Not right now.
Okay. The second place that we want you to record that you submitted a letter is on the team spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet is actually the same one that we've been looking at, the Montana Media Contacts. You'll notice across the bottom of the sheet that there are several tabs. So Montana Print Media, sheet 20. The next one is 2023 LTE and op-ed submissions. If you click on that tab, you can see that 8 different letters have been submitted by the print media team so far this year. And out of those, 4 have been published. So again, here you would put in the date it was submitted, the publication name, the authors, the title if there was one. And so these are the 2 places that we expect you to put your submission into. So then what happens is after you submit, the gleaners, the same gleaners that have been doing the hooks, will watch for the publication of your LTE, and you can certainly watch as well. So if you get the Daily Interlake or you get the Beacon, you can be monitoring to see if it's published. If it is published, then we want you to go back and update the action tracker. So once you submit this action, you will actually see it in your action tracker and you can go back and update it. So if I look, for example, if I filter for just media and publications here, if this was the letter to the editor that you had published, the roots and stems, thank you. This little airplane means that it's been submitted, but not yet published. You would be able to click on this and go back in and update it to actually show that it's been published. And once it's been published, that little airplane changes to an open book, meaning that it's been published. So here you can see when I clicked on that letter to the editor, it brought up all the details that had originally been submitted. And then here is the box where you can change the status to say that it was published. And then you come down to the very bottom. And once you, I believe, once you click on this box, it saves it automatically. There's not an additional box or anything that you have to click to save that. And then additionally, we would want you to come back to the media contact spreadsheet and add the information of when it was published and provide the link. Is that all clear?
Yeah, it's clear. I had a question about the action, the action tracker.
Okay.
How that last one that you were in had other CCL volunteers on it, and it had them as contributors. So will that track, like when you submit that, that will continue to just track that action for them as well, right? So not multiple people have to submit, like Walter doesn't need to submit and say, I did an action, I contributed as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not a perfect system, but typically the person, as you can see in this case, the author, Laurel, had the responsibility to go and make sure that everyone that had a role got credit for it, so that shows up in the action tracker. So yes, so we don't have multiple duplicate entries. It really falls to the author to do that.
Okay.
Great question. All right, so going back to our process document. So update the action tracker once it's been published, update the spreadsheet. Sometimes you, as I've already mentioned, you may not have access to the published newspaper link because you're not a subscriber. So if that's the case, you can reach out to the Gleaner or the subscriber, and they should be able to give you the link so that you can make sure all the information is complete. So the rest of this document includes some additional training resources. There are links to CCL standard training on writing effective letters. There's also basic media relations training. And all of these trainings usually take no more than 20 to 30 minutes. They're self-paced, and you get credit for taking them. That also shows up in the action tracker. General tips that we have. Sometimes I think as climate advocates, we can get discouraged and wonder if any of this makes any difference. It really does have an impact. I've been out and about the valley and had people mention to me that they'd seen my letter in the paper. So people are paying attention. For many of these, you don't have a choice. You typically can't go over 250 or 300. But we know in this day of overwhelming messages that short is better. People have short attention spans, so keep them short and punchy. Keep it simple. One idea per letter. Again, it's easier for people to hold in their heads. We usually try and mention members of Congress by name. That gets the attention of the staffers. They count the number of mentions that the MOCs get. So that's a very powerful method as well. I think everybody that's going to take this training knows, but just again, for perfect clarity, CCL's value system is very friendly, respectful, professional. We are very, very careful with the tone of our letters. And I say be bold, be brave. This is why we have a team. We have coaches, we have other writers that are willing to help. As I always told my kids during high school, the hardest part is writing the first sentence. Once you get past that, then you're on a roll and it just flows. So just write something and you'd be amazed what you can come up with. We have a few more detailed thoughts here, which I'm not going to read to you. You can take a look at these at a later date. I think the most critical thing in this section that I would mention is that we do try and follow a fairly typical formula. It doesn't have to look like this, but to mention the hook somehow, to talk about a problem, talk about a solution, and then have a call to action, whether it's call your MOC, write your MOC, call the local commissioners, whatever it is, have something, join CCL. There's usually a call to action at the end of the letter. If we've already scared you off with all the mention of Google Docs and Google Drive, we did do a specific training for that back in September of 2021. So if you need that training, you can click on this link and it'll give you some helpful tips. And then if you're just curious what a published letter looks like, we've got a couple of samples here that you can click on and go back and look at. We just looked at the action tracker. You could filter for media publications and go back and look at 6 months worth of published letters and see if that gives you some ideas or some sense of how we write and what has been successful. So I think that is everything that I wanted to cover. What I would encourage people to do who are watching this training in the future is when you get to this point, if someone's assisting you with the training or someone introduced you to this team, this would be a great time to pick up the phone, get with that person and say, let's do a practice run right here and now. Let's take a recent hook that we saw in the paper and let's spend 15 minutes trying to write a letter together, individually, together, however you want to do it. There's no substitute, like I was just saying, of getting the pen out, getting your computer out, and do some writing right then and there while it's all still fresh. So that, I believe, is the conclusion of the training. Alyssa, any other questions that you think might be helpful to people watching this in the future?
I don't have any. I think that was very thorough. I think just going back to your comment about the Google Docs and Google Drive, I know that can be a big deterrent for people, because it is, if you're not used to it, it can just seem confusing how to navigate all of that. So I don't know how you feel about this, Angie, but I think you can reach out to other CCL members for support in that avenue too, not just for writing stuff, but for helping navigate the Google Drive and how to update everything as well.
Yes, that's a great suggestion. Never be afraid to ask for help.
Yes.
All right, well, I'm
Yes.
going to stop sharing, and I'm also going to stop recording. Again,
Great.
thanks to Alyssa for participating so we could get this taped for other people down the road. And for new members of the team that will be watching this in the future, welcome. We're so glad to have you, and we can't wait to see you get published. There's something very satisfying and maybe a little scary, but more satisfying of seeing your name in the paper. So go do it, have some fun with it, and we look forward to working with you.